In this session, we're going to talk a bit about Israel, the church, and the nations. Some of this I have written down because I could get emotional and we would end up in the weeds. I have been to Israel since last Sunday. We made a very quick trip. There were some meetings that we needed to take, and there's a little opening in the calendar, and we stepped through it. On Thursday, we were standing on the edge of Gaza and spent the day looking at memorials to the more than 1,000 Israelis who were brutally murdered October the 7th of last year. I tell you, some people have denied it and say it didn't happen, that it's a fabrication of the media, and I can tell you they lie. A few weeks ago, we were in Washington, D.C. at the Israeli embassy, and we saw some raw footage of that day. But it was a totally different experience to stand on the ground in those communities. A dear friend of mine, a man I've known for 20 years, lived in one of those neighborhoods. And he said, I locked my family in the house. The only weapon I had was a knife, and I stood in front of my front door. And he said, I saw the terrorists. They were 4 doors down. And they turned and went the other direction. We left Friday morning. And by last evening, there were missiles falling in Jerusalem. So I've been to Israel since last Sunday. There were some necessary meetings for me to attend. And as we traveled home on Friday, I made some notes sitting on a plane. And I'd like to begin by just sharing those. It's the safest way for me to have this dialogue. Israel today is a nation besieged. There's a heaviness that has settled upon the people that I've never seen. I was there during the Intifada. I've been there when wars have broken out. I have been in and out of Israel since I was a boy, but I've never seen the heaviness that rests upon the people today. The price of freedom to our friends there seems very high. The determination of their adversaries seems unrelenting. Their enemies boast. They're filled with an arrogant pride and a sense of confidence. Their trusted friends amongst the nations, such as the United States, have stepped away and demanded that Israel submit to their murderous enemies. In Israel, there's an unprecedented loss of trust in their own leaders, in the government, in the military, and ultimately in their security. There are grim warnings, and they're no longer just grim warnings, of impending attacks from powerful nations and their proxies. The economy is struggling. Propaganda regarding Israel flourishes. And the truth, when it's spoken, is whispered. It is seldom boldly declared. Those that understand the truth don't want to incur the wrath of those propagating the anti-Semitic lies. So silence tends to dominate. It's in stark contrast to what's happening in other places in our world. There's a hatred expressed towards Israel and the Jewish people that is not expressed uniformly. There's no real move against Bashar al-Assad, the Syrian dictator who has destroyed his nation. He used poison gas against his own people. Millions of Syrian refugees were driven into Europe, and there were simply no calls from the international community nor from the Muslim street to return them to their historic homes. They were happy for them to become permanent refugees, invaders, if you prefer, of Europe. That's a very stark contrast to the attitudes towards Palestinians. There's been no real move against Sudanese leaders who have fomented a seemingly endless civil war. Untold numbers of innocent people have been brutally murdered. And you've not heard our State Department or the United Nations calling for some humanitarian whatever. There are no significant sanctions on China today, who boldly works to destroy our own national interest without apology, with great clarity and persistence. They oppress their political opponents violently. They utilize slave labor. They limit human freedom. And we celebrate them as an amazing society. We give billions of dollars to Iran, who, as a matter of public policy, fund terrorist organizations. They threaten innocent civilians in multiple nations. If you haven't been watching, more U.S. dollars have gone into Iran in the last 3 years through direct support or the purchase of their petroleum than we have given to Ukraine, Taiwan, and Israel combined. If you're not watching, that means we're funding the violence that Iran is perpetuating around the Middle East and throughout the world. They say repeatedly and consistently they intend to destroy Israel, the little Satan, and the United States, the great Satan. And we fund them. There's no real cry or even interest in a humanitarian ceasefire in Ukraine and their war with Russia, even though 500,000 people have died in a war, to be clear, which we largely provoked. There's no real move on our own continent against Mexican drug cartels who are trafficking women and children on our own border, funneling fentanyl into our country, resulting in the deaths of tens of thousands of Americans. But we are told consistently from the halls of Congress and from media sources, elevated platforms of academia, and even from pulpits, that Israel is an unacceptable aggressor and the perpetrator.
We were young, wild and free, chasing dreams by the sea, echoes of a distant melody, in the lights just you and me, photographs and shades of gold, stories that we've never told, memories that never grow old. In this heart they're always bold. Time moves on but we stay here, in the moments crystal clear, echoes of the yesteryear, in our hearts we hold them near. Fading memories in the light, lost in whispers of the night, in the silence we take flight, holding on to what feels right. Walks through streets of neon glow, silent whispers, tales of woe, in the dark our secrets show, in this art our love will grow. Time moves on but we stay here, in the moments crystal clear, echoes of the yesteryear, in our hearts we hold them near. Fading memories in the light, lost in whispers of the night, in the silence we take flight, holding on to what feels right. In the twilight, shadows play, awful whispers, tales of woe, in the hearts we find our say, in the dawn we'll never stray. Fading memories in the light, lost in whispers of the night, in the silence we take flight, holding on to what feels right. As the days turn into years, through the laughter, through the tears, in the echoes all our steers, in these dreams we face our fears. As the days turn into years, through the laughter, through the tears, in the echoes all our steers, in these dreams we face our fears.
Of genocidal intent, and we must demand that they stop and care for an enemy who has sworn to destroy them. That is the most common mantra. An enemy who in an unprovoked attack murdered more than 1,200 men, women, and children. An enemy who without apology raped, tortured, and mutilated. An enemy who took more than 120 hostages and has not released them. Nor have they allowed the Red Cross to provide wellness checks. And I'm sad to report that most Israelis that I talk to imagine the majority of the hostages are not even alive. For clarity's sake, to continue on this path for us as a nation, for us as a church, without severe judgment requires you to believe that there is no God. What are we doing? Well, I want to spend the time we have talking about Israel, the church, and the nations. And I would submit to you that an awareness of the people of Israel and what's happening in the land of Israel is more than some theological subset that you could afford to be interested in or not. To fail to understand what God is doing in the land of Israel and with the Jewish people leaves you unprepared to understand what He's doing in our own world. And I would invite you away from the temptation to be distracted by the activities of your families, by the plans for your summer vacation, by staring at your financial portfolio. I'm not opposed to vacations or families or finance. But in America, we still retain enough freedom and liberty, that you can have the inappropriate imagination, that you can medicate with distractions. I assure you there's no distraction today in Israel that's sufficient to keep them from being aware of the problems they have. And that scenario is not far from us. So it requires of us a change of cadence, a new response. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel. You know the drill. Hit the bell for notifications. If you want to, leave a comment.